It's holiday season, and that could mean for a lot of us travel season. So this morning, inside our Just Kidz emergency segment, Dr. Paula Robertson joins us to tell us about some tips for hassle-free travel with the little ones. Good morning, Dr. Robertson.
Good morning and season's greetings. Have you had a good Christmas?
I hope you did too.
I did.
Because we both had to avoid the travel rush and didn't have the fiasco of a child being placed on the wrong flight. It made international news that it happened in the US this Christmas season, Home Alone 1, 2, and 3 all over again. So we're ready and waiting for those tips, yeah?
Indeed. Yeah, definitely, we were talking about this during the break. I'd probably say tip number one is if you're having an unaccompanied minor, make sure that they've got their identification details. If it has to be stitched on the inside of their clothes, just really be sure they know their important numbers. So if they're old enough that they know the telephone numbers of their relatives to phone. This latest case, at least the young boy was able to phone his granny when he ended up in the wrong port.
Wait a minute.
Pretty rare, but still want to make sure you're covered for those things.
Right. And we were saying during the break as well that West Indians are less likely to do that minor traveling by themselves thing. But let's start from the beginning. In terms of the process to mitigate any sort of problems, how do we plan in terms of emergency situations particularly? We adults look at things like credit cards that have insurance, for example. Are there certain things like that in advance that we can look at for children when it comes to health and safety?
Yeah, and in fact, I think when you're traveling with young children, the first thing I'd tell parents is plan ahead. This isn't something you could really try and pull off last minute. There's a few things you do need to think about. First is obviously to walk with medication. Even if it's basic things, I usually have a little kind of kit that involves things like Panadol, for example, or your pain relieving medication, any medicines that's prescribed for that, so that you make sure you have that with you. Definitely planning ahead should also involve thinking about seating. So most airlines are actually really accommodating with this. So if you're traveling with little ones, really what you want to go for is extra leg room or bulkhead seats, so that you've got a little extra space. And for the little ones who are still in arms, they'll actually allow for the leverage that comes down, that allows for the baby seat to actually be strapped in. So that makes life a lot easier. Try and plan trips that fit in with nap times and sleep times, if you can. And you know, not always possible, but let's say you're doing a nighttime flight, you really want to keep your routines as much as possible. So if it's close to bedtime, make sure that they're brushed teeth, etc. Pajamas on. I have flown many times with kids in pajamas, and at Christmas time, nobody cares.
Right, this is right.
Christmas pajamas and look
cute. I learned that on the show today.
Yes.
But then that's a very incredible tip that I didn't think of before. Trying to keep things in time with a schedule is certainly going to help with that crankiness or that fussing on the plane itself.
Absolutely.
So let's just say we get to the plane. We've planned ahead and we're on the trip now. What sort of trips can we look forward to?
So two main ones here. For most kids, little ones in particular, the most uncomfortable times actually are the ascent and the descent. Once the plane is at cruising altitude, your pressure is equalized in the cabin. But during those two phases, that's when pressure changes a lot, and so you get a lot of discomfort in the ears. So one of my big tips here is swallowing actually helps to alleviate pressure. So with small babies, I actually really encourage, if they're breastfeeding, breastfeed them during the ascent and descent. Little ones can take a drink, for example, so if you drink water or juice, if you've walked with that. And older kids who can handle it, sucking or chewing, for example, so maybe sucking on a little lollipop or a sweet, or chewing on gum, if you allow that, can actually just help to equalize that pressure as well. So that definitely makes it easier. And the other thing is actually it's about keeping their interest. So we know with toddlers, they hate being confined, right? So one of the planning tip is to try and get window seats, so you minimize disturbance to others, but they also have that kind of view outside at all times. Yeah.
And you can still take your pictures over there, you know? So that's
exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm with you. All right. Now, some of those tips I genuinely didn't think of before because discomfort with the children. We know we can chew gum, but the lollipops are a good idea.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that make them a little excitable? Are we going to have a little
So it
tantrum?
kind of depends. I mean, you can get, there's a few good lollipops on the market. This is sound really weird, actually. But, for instance, there's a brand called Little Remedies that does lollipops for sore throats. And this is a license for kids 3 and above. And essentially, it contains a little pain reliever in it. So I use this for kids who have sore throats or a little tonsillitis, for instance. But it can also be used for things like this as well, provided they're old enough and they can handle sweets like this safely. Or you can go for lollipops that come with natural ingredients, so they don't have a lot of added sugar and so on as well.
All right, some dietary tips laced in with the travel. I like this. Okay, so we're planning ahead. We know that tip on breastfeeding is blowing my mind. I'd never thought of that. So that in terms of the ascent or the descent, we're getting some stuff out of the way. We've thought of what we're doing while we're flying because we're giving them the view. We're making sure that they're comfortable. Let's say we get to the airport now. That's some walking. That's some pulling along of child and luggage. How do we navigate that?
I have a good few tips with this one.
Right.
The first is, it depends on how old your child is. So if they are little enough, you definitely want to invest in one of those slings or carriers, so you wear your baby through the airport. This has saved my life many times, actually. So you can have your little harness and make sure that you're safely carrying them through. And for toddlers, little toddler legs get tired very easily. And some of those airports have really long walkways.
That's why there's those little things that just roll along, so you don't have to walk.
Absolutely, right? So the walk to baggage claim or to your terminal, for instance. And so increasingly there's ride-on luggage, actually. One of my favorite possessions was something, until the day it broke apart. It lasted a long time, God rest Trunky. But Trunky was the best. So Trunky is a trademark for probably the first of its kind, and there have been several since then. But essentially, this is a piece of ride-on luggage that has little characters, but it allows the kids to actually sit on it.
Right.
And it has wheels, so you can pull them through, pull those tired legs through the airport. And that was wonderful. We took Trunky everywhere.
Doesn't come in an adult size?
I wish it did, actually.
Okay.
It really does.
I'm sure there is not.
It should.
We can move this out.
Absolutely should. But yeah, so that actually really helps. And then the last thing I'd say is, you really don't need to get an expensive stroller. I use a lot of the umbrella ones, which are the ones that fold up completely, but they're really, inexpensive. So you don't mind if they've been banged around. And these collapse completely, so they're lightweight, they're easy to store. Some of them actually you can store in the overhead compartment.
And then to assemble would be equally easy.
Absolutely. So you're not lugging along a lot of extra bits.
Well, let's talk about the lugging around through security points. I know that a lot of the times you want to have those kits, you want to have things handy, but they may not be the best things to navigate through the security system. So any tips there?
I'd say, it doesn't have to be complicated. Like, for instance, if you want to keep little ones entertained, I literally say, this goes back a bit to during the flight itself, I used to really just get cheap little coloring books, little toys, for instance, and then just kind of wrap them up a little bit. So when we were bored, we'd pull them out, right? Oh, look at this is so exciting, until they lost interest again. So things like that are easy to get through. Most international airports actually have a family and children's line, so they'll actually try and divert you, knowing that you have to carry extra things, and to take advantage of that, priority boarding and so on if you can, so you have time to get in and get settled in, for example. But yes, be prepared to actually sometimes have to do a little bit of extra checking. Really, this becomes an issue around carrying fluids. And so, for instance, I've had the experience of having to taste formula, just to make sure that it actually is what it says on the tin, or sample foods in front of security. So you may have to do things like that in certain airports. I am a big believer in getting kids involved as much as possible, so really enjoy the experience. So Trunky, again, used to get packed with toys, and we've been stopped, and I have one classic example where he got searched, and he was full of cars when my son had packed 1 million cars inside Trunky, and cars just fell out everywhere. But you just have to shake your head. The security officers were laughing.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
And I imagine your son felt very important and very involved in the process. Look at me having big people actions to take. Now, you did mention in terms of sampling liquids and even having to taste things to demonstrate its authenticity. Let's get it back to health and safety a little bit, because I'm thinking snacks and ways to entertain the kids, as you mentioned. Are there things that you recommend recommend or that we do or don't include perhaps for those trips?
Yeah, I mean, it again depends a little bit on age. So really younger kids, you want to avoid hard candies and things like that. But I would definitely pack snacks that they are familiar with, ideally healthy ones, because sometimes it can be a wait even for waiting for the service to happen on the airplane. So you want to have your trusty snacks. Think ahead about things like a change of clothes as well, a favorite toy, a blanket, anything like that they like. Preload your favorite movies and so on your devices for the older kids who really want to be entertained. And increasingly, the airlines will actually have apps that allow you to. Yes. Caribbean Airlines has one that allows you to download their favorite movies and so on beforehand.
Kid-friendly movies, for sure, for sure. And in that case, we have gone through quite a bit. I know there's even more that we can do, but you would have faced a lot of children, patients, parents even, who may need some calming. And I definitely could see that happening with flight. Parents might be nervous, the kids might be a little fretful. You have any pro tips there in terms of calming, specifically with flights?
Yeah, well, one of the big ones is really about pain and discomfort. And we mentioned that really my big tip here is make sure that you've got something that has them swallowing. And if you need to, you can use things like paracetamol. Yeah, that's Panadol, just if pain is uncomfortable. It's going to be temporary until we're cruising. The other is go easy on yourself. Listen, I was that person before I had kids that did not want the parent with the crying child to sit next to me. So please don't sit next to me, please don't sit next to me. And so you've got to accept actually as a flying parent that you are now persona non grata, right? But people who've had children will understand, by and large. And sometimes it works to your advantage. There was once a flight I was on, and as I sat, my son was very good at flying, I have to say. And as I sat down with him, she immediately said, "Excuse me, I'm going to get another seat," right? And she disappeared, and I had wonderful space because
nobody else came.
Yeah, so sometimes there's good stuff, and I mean, listen, it's going to be temporary. Don't beat yourself up.
Right.
Go easy on yourself for sure. And I think the question is, sometimes I'll get asked, well, should I give my kids something like an antihistamine, so a little Benadryl or so on to soothe? I know this one is the great question, and personally I don't advocate for it because of a couple of reasons. One is about 10 to 15% of children actually become very hyperactive with an antihistamine. And so you don't want to discover this on the flight.
Of course not.
Yes, your child falls in that 15% where they suddenly go a little, berserk on the flight. And the other is that it actually can sometimes take as long as 4 to 6 hours to metabolize that fully. So they can be quite groggy and drowsy, and that then has a knock-on effect on sleep times and nap times, which get thrown off totally. And so I really would say, realize that for a lot of kids, it's just that they don't want to be confined. So pre-plan your entertainment, think about little things that can keep them active, have your window seat, be prepared for that kind of takeoff and landing, and just really work on your self-care. Because you know that this is something that all parents who have had kids have experienced, and you're not really going to be the person who wants to beat themselves up over this. So, go easy on yourself.
We want you to enjoy that trip, enjoy that holiday flight, and with those pro tips from our in-house doctor, we certainly will see some better flights for the parents and the kids both.
No, absolutely. And, the earlier you get them involved, actually, the better travelers they make. So,
Well, I'll be traveling solo for a minute, but to those of you who needed those tips, of course, you can get these tips and more every single Wednesday as the Just Kidz Emergency Medical segment will continue right here on the Now Morning Show every Wednesday. But for now, we say thank you very much to Dr. Robinson.
You're most welcome.
Giving us those flight tips during the holiday season, and we wish you a happy new year, as some of us will be traveling in 2024 instead.
Yes, thank you. Same to you as well.
For those of you who are staying with us, not going anywhere, it's a good time to stick around. Our phone calls are coming up next, where you can tell us your tips or even more here on the Now Morning Show after these messages.
Not later, but now. Think about children. Not later, right now. Think about